It's feeding off our suffering and it doesn't stop.
We're losing. We're running out of time and we still don't know the goddamn rules.
I want to dive deeper into what Sophia was discussing about Abraham with Christy and Marielle. That conversation really got me thinking not just about the story of Abraham itself, but also some of the biblical themes I talked about in my recent videos and research. The story of Abraham, the number 5 that I noticed back in season 2, the book of Lamentations, and even the dreams and nightmares and From all seem connected by the same themes: testing, suffering, faith, and eventually grace. Abraham's story is ultimately being tested by God and remaining faithful even when he doesn't fully understand what's happening. Lamentations is filled with sorrow and mourning, but underneath all of that pain, there's still hope and restoration. Then you have the number 5, which is biblical symbolism. It's often connected to God's grace and mercy. That's interesting because Lamentations have 5 chapters, and Abraham's test ends with grace when God provides a ram instead of requiring the sacrifice of his son. Dreams and nightmares also play a major role throughout the Bible. They often represent warnings, hidden truths, fear, or divine messages. And when you connect all of those ideas together, it starts to feel like From is telling the story of people trapped in a spiritual test, forced to endure suffering and confusion before they can finally reach understanding or freedom. Now, I've talked before about the idea of the town being stuck in a 40-year cycle or curse. But what if it's deeper than that? What if the town represents an entire generation trapped in a long period of suffering? Or maybe it's a test that has to be completed before anyone can truly escape. And honestly, I don't think the show is based on just one religion. It feels like it pulls from multiple religion beliefs, mythology, folklore, and cultural traditions all at once. For example, when Sarah tells Elgin that they want her to go to the diner, pour a glass of water, take a sip, and pour it back into the pitcher, that feels symbolic. It almost comes across like a ritual or a test of obedience. I think the man in yellow was testing Sarah to see if she was still loyal. At first, she refused to do it, but the moment she witnessed Sophia fall, her attitude changes completely. That tells me Sophia may have bigger plans for Sarah than we realize. Now, let's talk about the bookmark Julie made. In the scene with Julie and Randall, Randall finds a page in the Grand Gulag about someone named Storywalker Fred. According to the book, he is a distant cousin of the Grand Gulag and spends his weekends story walking through different tales and adventures. And if you look closely at the illustration in the book, you notice mushrooms surrounding a tree that looks very similar to the tree Victor measured back in season 3 in episode 3, the same area where he buried the suitcase full of items. Then there's the symbol inside the book. I could be wrong, but after researching, it almost looks connected to a musical notation. And honestly, this show has been heavily tied to music and musical patterns from the very beginning. Julie then explains how the bookmark's supposed to work, but obviously it doesn't. And I think there's a reason for that. I don't believe the bookmark itself would allow Julie to story walk. I think it actually ties to her clothing, specifically the shirt she was wearing. That shirt looks like it came from the 1970s, which may explain why she keeps getting pulled into that specific time period. Now, I may be wrong, and it may not be the clothing. Hell, it may be the pictures that Victor and also Eloise had drew. So that's probably on bookmarks as well. But what's really interesting is that the man in yellow doesn't seem to recognize Julie at first. Instead, he assumes she belongs in that era. That changes everything. It suggests Julie isn't observing the past. She may actually be physically blended into it somehow. And there's another detail that I noticed. One of the girls that was lying on the ground is positioned almost exactly like the woman that was attacked by by the cicadas in season 3, and even similar to the way Jim's body is positioned in season 4. But when you compare season 1 episode 4 to season 4 episode 4, there are subtle differences. The car placement changes. You see that there's a different color car. The man standing near the house is gone. Small details aren't identical. And so it makes me wonder if Julie is traveling back to the past. Shouldn't everything stay exactly the same? Or is she accidentally changing small parts of the timeline every time she story walks? Now let's talk about Golem. Fatima described it as a symbol of hope, a protector created from clay. In religious folklore, a golem is a being formed from earth and brought to life to defend people. That immediately connects back to Genesis 2:7, where God forms Adam from the dust of the ground and breathes life into him. And that's the key difference. A golem can move and obey commands, but it doesn't truly have a soul. In many stories, it can't even speak. It imitates life without fully possessing it. Now, we finally know who's putting the voices in Sarah's head. The crazy part is that in season 1, Sarah started hearing the voices long before the man in yellow was physically near her. So that raises a major question. If the man in yellow was responsible for the voices, who was he disguised as during season 1? Because we already know he can manipulate appearances. And then there's Victor. Victor started measuring the trees again, and as the audience, we clearly see that they're moved. Every time the trees move, something changes. Either a new arrival coming or something terrible is about to happen. And also, I want to mention is that the reason why he also measured the trees is because he's afraid. And towards the end of the episode, we see something being pulled from the water. And let's be honest, whatever is coming out that water is definitely not going to be good. So here's my theories. I think the town is entering a completely new phase of the cycle. As I mentioned before, the moving trees may not predict arrivals anymore. They could represent the town itself shifting to another layer or a reality. That would explain why Julie noticed subtle differences in the past. She may not be traveling through one fixed timeline, but through slightly different versions of events. Another theory is that the man in yellow doesn't need to be physically be near someone to influence them. Once he establishes a connection, he may be able to project thoughts, voices, dreams, or even communicate remotely through forms of telecommunication, like when Jim received the radio message and the phone call from Thomas. Let me know in the comments below if you enjoy episode 4 of From. Coming up next, I will be discussing Widow's Bay episode 4. I cannot wait for that episode because I have been enjoying this series so far. I'll see you in the next one.